Where are the men who stand when the world falls apart? Last week, we witnessed the brutal assassination of Charlie Kirk, a man who became a beacon for a generation of young leaders who was unafraid to speak truth. And while the culture tells our sons that strength is toxic and faith is foolish, more and more young men are waking up in today's society. And today I sat down with Bryce Eddy, a 4th-degree black belt, host of the Bryce Eddy Show, and a man who walked side by side with Charlie during the rise of Turning Point USA. But this episode isn't just about remembering a hero. It's about rebuilding men. We're talking identity before activity, why men lose strength when they forget who they are in God, and how to rebuild your body, mind, and spirit in a culture that's actively trying to dismantle all three. You'll learn how to reverse the decline from testosterone to theology, why jiu-jitsu humbles you like nothing else, real men don't scream, they stand, and how you can become a lighthouse in a generation of emotional tugboats. So if you're done being reactive, and if you're tired of the numbness and you're ready to rise with clarity and conviction, this one's for you.
Leaders are not born in a womb. They are forged through heat, pressure, and a whole lot of sweat. The Fire Forged Leader podcast serves the audience through exploring leadership at work, in the community, and with the family, using a practical perspective and real-life experiences from the host, Steve Baumgartner, and his guests in the Forge. Now, it's time to enter the Forge with the Fire Forged Leader.
Guys, today we have a really special guest on by the name of Bryce Eddy. Bryce runs the Bryce Eddy Show, which is a very popular podcast. He talks about I'd like to say a wide range, but it's not really a wide range. It's about men being men, about men stepping up. It's about politics, unapologetically conservative views. He's also the board president, of Turning Point USA, does a lot of things in the anti-abortion realm and a lot of different things like that. Bryce, it is good to have you, man. It's been a crazy, crazy week like we were just talking about. I'm glad you could make the time to get on, man.
Yeah, thank you. And let me make sure I clarify one of those things. So I'm not the president of the TPUSA board. There's 4 entities, and I served on America's Turning Point for Charlie, which I was board president for that. But those 4 entities make up the larger enterprise that is Turning Point, and includes our C4, the C3, the foundation, and other entities that we have. The various things that Turning Point does fall under. But I want to make sure that we clarify that. But yeah, thank you for having me. It's been, as we were talking, a very weird week because I knew Charlie personally and got to be a part of that inner circle and really see the dramatic and meteoric rise of Charlie that was largely due to his tireless work ethic, his commitment to truth, and his faith and his gift as a communicator. This is a guy that was on the road 300 days a year and managed to be a phenomenal family man and dedicated husband at the same time. Charlie was doing the Lord's work and really created a tidal shift in our culture towards more conservative values. And you see that by how young men are polling now. Kids in high school and recent graduates are trending more conservative, and we're talking the males, than they ever have in recent history. And we created a generational problem or a generational disaster here in the United States. We wrecked people and we wrecked our kids, and Charlie was responsible for that generational solution. And as far as I'm concerned, that's why he was taken out. That's why he was so vilified, is there was nobody that was more effective. He was responsible for getting Donald Trump elected largely because of the ground game that they outsourced to TPUSA, and really the change that Charlie created in young people. and young men specifically. The women are a different story, but I've told people the girls aren't trending more conservative. I said, yes, but if they have strong leaders, they will follow their men and become conservative. And it's an interesting thing, and it was an amazing thing to witness, and his impact, I think, is really only going to get greater from here, even with his absence on this.
Yeah, and I heard something here this morning. I was listening to something on, it was a Christian man talking about men. I can't remember where I had heard it, to be honest with you, Bryce, but he was talking, and it hit me just sideways this morning. Never heard it like this before, but in the 70s, it was, I don't want a man. In the 80s is, I don't need a man. And then we're at the point of, what the hell is a man? There's a lot of reverse engineering that we got to do to get things back to the way that God designed it to.
Yeah, you recognize that happened systematically over time. Marched through the institutions, and Charlie talked about that a lot, destroyed the real foundations of reality in our culture. You couldn't have told somebody in the 70s that men could get pregnant. You could not have done that then, but you had to first break the family, diminish the masculine role. You had to go through this process for us to get to the point where we could deny the very fabric of reality and say that there's no difference between men and women. And yeah, men should be able to compete in women's sports. I mean, why not? We got to the point of absurdity that we were saying that there's really no physical difference between men and women. And I don't know if you saw those videos where they'd show an abnormally tall female on a basketball court or something like that, and they would say, see, she's just got some natural differences in her, so it's just the same as, oh, we should all be competing, and yeah, these men shouldn't be denied the ability to go get gold in a track meet against a bunch of young high school girls. It just got to the point of incredible absurdity.
It's interesting because I just can't make it out for the life of me why they would want that, right? Why people would actually want that kind of level of insanity in our world, Bryce. Is there any reasonable explanation for it?
There is a measured attack on us. We know why all of this happened. We know how it happened. We know why. We know the motivation. The motivation, the family is the smallest form of government, right? So if you can destroy that, you can take over the power structures. If you can diminish the individual and their own agency, if you can have people deny their very essence of being made in the image of God, you can do all kinds of things. And so this was an intentional conspiracy, both our enemy, capital E, and our enemies, lowercase e, to destroy and own the world. When we talk about the battle that we're in, yes, it is spiritual. Like, who are they? They are not really the communists. They are not really the socialists. That's just a sales pitch. What we're talking about is the globalists that want a feudalism 2.0. They want to be in charge, and making all the decisions, and they want the rest of us to be slaves. You can also call them the central planners, or the people who just want to accumulate power. They'll do that using any means. Bezmenov called the kids, or the young people, or the people that were believing in the cause, the useful idiots. They created a bunch of useful idiots, and you cannot tell the useful idiots that we want them to be slaves. You got to tell them that life is unfair and people are taking advantage of you, and we're going to make things more equal, and we're going to give you more stuff, and we're gonna make sure that life is fair and the rich pay their fair share. You don't want to tell them that you want them to be numb on drugs and playing video games. I mean, that doesn't fly.
Yeah, so we're getting pretty deep in the weeds already. I just want to kind of roll back just a little bit. Bryce, you've been around in the background for quite a while, watched this growth of Charlie. That's probably not the first dabbling that you've had inside of this world of conservative politics. Where'd you start out at?
Yeah, so I looked at politics kind of like as my sport. I grew up, I was a preacher's kid. My dad had polio when he was 2 years old. He was a paraplegic, walked on crutches. So we weren't really like playing football in the backyard. We were wrestling, and I became a wrestler. But he was not a guy who was that interested in watching football and things like that. But he was a guy who liked ideas, and we would talk philosophically about things. And so that stirred up in me a desire to really understand political philosophy and how we run things and why we run things. And so finding that interesting, at 16, 15, 16, I think I read an article about Rush Limbaugh. And that article, it was maybe Time Magazine or something like that. And this is when Rush was gaining some steam and really owning the airwaves of talk radio. And he had this line in it that just made me laugh. And I'm like, oh, I like that. And he talked about arguing with liberals was, so easy that he tied one half of his brain behind his back. And I just thought that was hilarious. And I was like, okay, who is this guy? And after reading that article, I was a sales guy trying to make my way in the world and just get my next meal. You eat what you kill kind of a thing. And so I was listening to talk radio, and I was driving around and listening to Rush Limbaugh. And then on those stations, it would roll into a Dennis Prager or a Michael Medved or other just excellent hosts. I loved it. I loved ideas. I loved how we made things work and why things made sense, and instinctively knew that some of the nonsense that they were talking about with feminism didn't make sense, and pushed back distinctly. I wanted to be a police officer when I was young. And when I came to the age of that, I decided I'd rather be in business, and it was during the Rodney King time and morale was low and I wasn't interested in pursuing that. But I remember just seeing a lot of the push to like women in the front lines of the military, or women can do the policing job and be on patrol just as good as the guys, and all that stuff. I instinctively knew that push towards the feminism was a non-starter. I knew that was not true. I was a wrestler. I knew that those female cop couldn't out wrestle me and couldn't put me in handcuffs. And I just saw things like that were starting to early on bubble up, that Rush Limbaugh was talking about at the time, that he was talking about things that at that time, my friends, because I would annoy some of my buddies by talking about some of this political stuff, they would think I was crazy and, oh, come on, dude, talk about other things. Let's go chase some girls. Let's watch some football. Now, some of those same lifelong friends I've had are coming to me and going, can you believe that they're doing this? Can you believe that they're saying this? I'm like, yeah. Do you remember I was telling you that this is the path that it was going to go down? I told you, what colleges we're going to start to do. I had friends where their younger brothers growing up in a conservative household ended up becoming super liberal, and they were like surprised. And I'm saying, wait a second, Dennis Prager said that was going to happen, that sending your kids to university was playing Russian roulette with their minds. And all of those things came so true. And so those early pioneers got me interested in this stuff. And I got to meet many of these heroes. I got to host Dennis Prager in my backyard for their company party during COVID, because no one else could throw parties, and I was willing to break all the rules and flaunt everything in California, and I wasn't afraid of getting arrested for that sort of dumb stuff. That's my trajectory. And then I did get into mixed martial arts, and I'm a long-time jiu-jitsu guy and owned a jiu-jitsu school and had those hobbies. And all of those things are inherently meritocracies. And so it's hard to believe the left's lies when you are immersed in all of that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that whole jiu-jitsu experience too, Bryce. I ain't gonna lie. I was listening to you talk about being a wrestler. My little pansy blue belt self, I'm like, oh my God, he's a black belt? And he's a wrestler? What the hell?
Yeah. Fourth degree black belt. So that just means I'm old. I've been at it for a long time. Yeah, no, I got to experience in the jiu-jitsu world some stuff that I wish I knew how special it was at the time. But in the early days of the jiu-jitsu world, Joe Rogan was one of my classmates. I wrestled him 1,000 times. Eddie Bravo helped him get ready for the fight that made him famous and helped him start all the 10th Planet schools. And we had a bunch of celebrities and a bunch of UFC fighters that would come through our school to train with us to learn that more refined side of the jiu-jitsu game. And yeah, it was a fun and wonderful time. And a lot of those old school fighters are still friends of mine, and Chuck Liddell, people like that I still get to interact with. In fact, Chuck and I were texted a few weeks back. He was asking me for some thoughts on some things. And yeah, it's just been a wonderful journey, and I think all men should learn to fight. And by the way, blue belt that's no lightweight. I tell my students, I just sold my school since I moved But my students, I would tell them, and I still tell anybody I ever train with, if I'm teaching you, give me a year and I will give you a superpower. And a year of dedicated jiu-jitsu practice, you can reach blue belt. And that is at the point at which you are competitive and competent enough that you can probably handle yourself with 99% of the people on this planet. And obviously, at blue belt level 2, you've maybe worked out some of the notions that you've got this like level that you can get to, and I'm a race car in the red and nobody can stop me and all stuff. You get humbled so much that you're not out there looking for fights. You recognize your own limits, but you are capable and competent. And that, I hope everybody at least dedicates themselves to some fighting art, some combat sport. And I say sport for a reason. It needs to have some kind of competitive element to it, or else it's largely worthless. You can't really do a year of any of the traditional Japanese martial arts and actually win in a fight. You can't, most of those, you can't even do 10 years and actually win in a fight. But that's in some ways not a controversial statement anymore, but it used to be.
Yeah, you can break a good plastic board that's already pre-broke though.
Yeah, you can threaten some boards here and there, but yeah, that's about it.
Now, I will tell you that I'm 6'3". I'm getting a little bit older. I might be 6'2" now, but
yeah,
I probably still got a little bit of that to work out of me just because I got that size thing going on, and I still go in there and try and push people around. And yeah, what happens? I land on my ass.
Yeah. Well, I'm about 5'10", 200s and vicious, but that's it.
Yeah, it's amazing. The humility that comes out on the mat. I think it's representative though of life with males in general though. And I'm going back to when we're talking about, I'm just going to throw it out there, versus left, right? All of my friends are on the right, and I'm using my left hand. I don't know why that is. Let's go over here.
Hey, it looks right to me.
All of my friends are on the right, and that's not by choice. That's just by who I'm attracted to. And the reason for that is that these are people who are willing to go through some hard shit, right? They're not going to blame other people. They're not going to sit there and make excuses and what have you. They're going to test their limits. They're going to challenge themselves, things like that. Now, the ones that I see over here, and I'm making a very gross statement here, but there's a lot of, and it goes back to what you were talking about, there's a lot of blame. There's a lot of, you did this to me. It's not fair. It's that sort of thing. And I just choose not to be around those people.
Yeah, it's a mentality. Yeah, it's a mentality. And what's more, and this is a gross generalization, but stereotypes are funny for a reason, because they generally are true, right? And some of them are painful for the people that they're told against. Now, most of it's funny, and we should be able to make fun of everyone and anyone. But what's interesting about the left is they're largely ugly. And I say that because they're beautiful in God's eyes, but they have cultivated, in rejecting God's image for them, they've largely cultivated ugliness. And that it's almost, you see those videos of the person who gets, the first time they get arrested, and then you see the subsequent mugshot images that go over the years, and they get uglier and uglier, and they have more piercings and more tattoos and more. You see that with the left. The longer you are on the left and you start to adopt that point of view, you cultivate an ugliness. And now my heart goes out for a lot of these people, because many of them are damaged, especially a lot of these young women that choose that are damaged, have been victims of abuse. And what they've done is, instead of going towards healing and working those things through, they are embracing that, and they will go and make themselves ugly so they never get abused again. Or so there is some stuff that we need to be incredibly sympathetic towards, and they are a evangelistic opportunity for us, but the left cultivates ugliness. And then you look at the men, and the men largely are guys who couldn't do a pull-up if it meant saving their life. They are physically unfit and unimpressive. A lot of it, I think, is the early andropause effect that is, really because of environmental toxins and food issues and hormonal deficiencies and things like that. I think some of that has created left-wing people too. Low testosterone, I think, is responsible for left-leaning ideologies in a lot of young men, which is really scary to think about. But We know this because if a dude like Mark Zuckerberg starts training jiu-jitsu, which he did, and started to hang around with more robust dudes, his testosterone probably went up. Exercise does drive it up. There are environmental factors that increase your testosterone. Maybe he even got on some TRT after he found out the doctors that it was low. And all of a sudden he's got a better ideology and he starts moving away from some more of that left-wing liberal bent. They started, I don't know if you remember this, but they started attacking working out in the gym scene as those are the conservative bros, as kind of something that they should wholesale reject. Look at some of these guys like Parker Get a Job, I'm not sure what his first name was, or Dean Withers, or guys that would be following Charlie and trying to debate Charlie. They're Adderall-fueled, effeminate, weak in the way that they even gesture. There was distinctly no masculinity in them. And so some of it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Are you a product of your environment? Are you a product of your bad thinking? Yeah, I think so. Did it start there? I don't know. But I think that we need to encourage, as parents, as leaders, as coaches, we need to encourage the kind of remasculinization of men. Let's take our young men and give them a little bit of adversity. Let's get these boys out from behind the screens and running in the dirt and the grass again and climbing trees. And I think that we'll solve a lot of these generational issues.
Agreed. As I was listening to you talk, there was two things that came to mind. I just had Allie Gilbert, who's a huge TRT expert, and she was talking about testosterone in general, and I absolutely love Allie, but I did some of my own research on foods, and I found it just crazy. Like the top 10 testosterone boosters for men, beef, eggs, it's all of the we're naturally drawn to.
It's not a vegan diet.
And the top estrogen boosters are almonds, lettuce, all the crap that the food pyramid's been trying to get us to eat for years. And then I lost the other one, Bryce. Dang it. I said two and there's only one. She also had this chart that was AI generated, of course, but it showed just pictures of men in their 20s going panel to panel. And it showed like 1940. And this guy was built like you. Except
they looked like rough and tumble men. You look at high school pictures and you'd think that they were college or out with a cigarette hanging out of their mouths. All these dudes are jacked and oh wait, that kid's 16. What is this? Yeah, no, it's a wild thing. There's a chart that I have somewhere that showed the early andropause effect in men, and it showed that the young men of today in their 20s have the equivalent of what an 85-year-old that had been born in the World War II era, their testosterone was the same. And in that 200 to 300 level, there was a group of 3 guys that ran a podcast that decided to get their testosterone measured, and they did the results on air. And I think the highest dude of the bunch was 350. And those guys were in their late 20s. In your late 20s, you should be 700, 800, 1,000. It's unbelievable what's happened. And again, some of this stuff were food companies, the companies that make our shampoos and all those sort of things, who know that they, for the sake of the profit, have been putting poison in all of the things that we're consuming. And there are things that outsiders should be criminally responsible for, I feel. And by the way, a lot of Christians are on the board and are in the executive leadership of these companies and all this stuff. And I think that they should be absolutely shamed that they have created an environment that has destroyed masculinity at its root level. Now, there's plenty of things that we can do. And so we can't be victims of this. And I counsel some of my students and some of the people that I mentor over the years to get some of that stuff checked out and start eating better, eat like a man, get out, do some things with your life, because activity and getting after it in life will, by its very nature, increase your performance and your testosterone levels. And and we need that.
Yeah. And it's crazy too, because the doctors, their range is like 250 to 1100, right? So if you're in range, you're all right. That's a bunch of BS. There's an
no,
opposite
100%. And I'm a proponent of TRT and hormone replacement for men and women. I think we need to know what all of our biomarkers are, know what all of our labs look like. If you monitor most of that stuff, you don't need to be spending much time in the doctor's offices, and you don't need to be going on all kinds of other medicines in order to combat what's happening to you. And by the way, testosterone, and I've been on it for a few years now. And I don't get, people think, oh, that's why you're jacked. No, I've always been jacked. But I do feel pretty good now. It helps with recovery. If I'm off testosterone or on testosterone, there might be a 2-pound difference in my weight, because that's what it was back when I went on it. I didn't gain any more muscle, but I was able to recover and I was able to sleep better. And by the way, testosterone for men and women, if women have low testosterone, they feel miserable and crazy. If men have low testosterone, they're lethargic and aimless. And if you get those numbers right, testosterone makes you feel good. You feel like you can accomplish something in this world again. And people are out there suffering a malaise or depression or things like that. Check your numbers.
Agreed. The other thing I was going to go back to is this identity. You were talking about identity. It just hit me like a ton of bricks, Bryce. So my clients, that's the first place that we start at is, what is your identity in God? I sent a video to one of my new clients the other day, and it was just another member of my organization. And I said, how old do you think he is? And he goes, oh, he's probably in his mid 40s. I said, that dude is 57. 57. No, he can't be 57. That right there is, this guy he just turned 50 not too long ago, and he looks like he's 60, right? That's from his own words. I'm like, get into the program, of course, because it's my program. Get to work on aligning your identity back up with the beauty of what God designed for you. There is no reason why you can't look like you're in your 40s again, just by connecting to that identity. I thought that was a really cool point that you brought up with, how when you get further away from that identity and what you were designed for, how it turns to ugliness. So just wanted
it's palatable. I think there's people that are listening to this that probably know family members that once they started to identify with a more left-leaning perspective on things, they physically changed. I mean, is really evident in, again, not just what they're cultivating, but if you are on the idea that you're a victim, that comes out in you, and that manifests in ways that are destructive to you as a person. And whatever you're dwelling on, whatever you are consuming, will come out in your bones, and you will see it.
Agreed. 100%. What you drinking? Anything good?
Coffee. The drink of champions.
Nice. I'm about a pot and a half in myself, if you can't tell.
Yeah, no, you know what? I love these shows because we can go anywhere we want to go. I do bulletproof coffee in the morning.
Yep.
A little bit of clarified MCT oil. I use C8, a little bit of butter, and I cheat a little bit because I do a little bit of heavy whipping cream. And I generally will have my 1 cup of coffee, and then I'll have a caffeinated drink, a mild caffeinated drink during my workouts, which I generally do in the afternoon, or if I'm doing back-to-back podcasts talking about great things, and I might have an extra one. But yeah, no, I'm not an all day long caffeine or all day long coffee drinker, but I do find people who do not like coffee suspicious. I'm not sure if I can trust a person who doesn't like coffee.
I agree. That are the ones who have to have the whipped cream on top and the cherry and all that stuff.
That's not coffee. If you're doing a frappuccinos and things like that, doesn't count.
Agreed. And then it's a whole nother level if you buy it from McDonald's.
I will say something, though, and I do want to point this out, because we do need liberals in this world, and we do need the left. And one thing that I've decided, aside from just being fodder for great conversations and our political opponents, they make great coffee. And the bluer the hair, the more the piercings, usually the better the brew. So I've decided, when people have accused me of wanting to get rid of lefties, I've said absolutely not, because we need good coffee.
Need good baristas.
That's right.
So let's go back to working with Charlie and that experience, what that was like, kind of early days and that growth period in there, and really why he captured the hearts of these young men and America.
I think that being unapologetically in pursuit of the truth in a world where we are awash in lies is super attractive in a time like we're in right now. The people know that something's wrong. I think that young men know that something's wrong. They'll preyed upon that with a lot of folks and said, oh, I'll tell you what is wrong, and then sold them a pack of lies, right? And what Charlie did was he was peddling hope, and he was peddling the message of Jesus Christ. He was peddling the gospel. He was unapologetically speaking the truth on things that were, getting him in a fair amount of trouble, especially in those early days. Charlie was an autodidact and was unstoppable in his accumulation of knowledge. And I got to witness how Charlie grew just even in his biblical knowledge. So he was raised Christian, and he made his faith a very serious faith commitment in really during COVID. And I remember so distinctly, I was his close protection driver for a couple of events in the early days. And I took him out to an event, and he and Erica were in the back of the SUV, and he was asking me about some of my views on eschatology, the end times theology stuff. And I grew up a little bit allergic to a lot of that stuff because I grew up as a preacher's kid and listened to all these guys endlessly debate these sort of in-house arguments. I was tired of it, but I had a broad perspective on a bunch of those different views and how many of them varied and what people thought. I still don't always get the labels right, and I think that's my own personal rebellion, but I can describe the various positions that folks take. And I remember Charlie and I just having this thought and this discussion as he was seeking some of these things out and puzzling through the depths of Scripture. Charlie of a week ago, Charlie was a master in it all. Charlie could communicate from memory more about the Bible and quote more Bible verses than most pastors, could understand the nuance of all of these arguments better than almost any pastor I've ever listened to. Charlie could lay out the message of the gospel in 2 or 3 minutes or less so succinctly. He could lay out great portions of Scripture and condense them and clarify them and communicate them better than almost anybody I've ever heard. And that he didn't start out that way, but he was tireless in his pursuit of learning, in his pursuit of knowledge, in his pursuit of truth. And where he had been in the early days of TPUSA, so focused on politics and understanding the political landscape and what our founding fathers wrote and what our detractors were writing and what Marx wrote. Charlie consumed all of that and committed so much of it to memory and knew so much about all those things, but yet had applied it in the most recent years to Scripture. And he was just really unbelievable and just so impressive. He was a savant. He was one of one, just a true uniquely gifted guy, and our loss is so profound. I do believe God is going to be orchestrating all of this for good, of course, and I think Charlie's legacy is going to just be monumental, and I think his impact is certainly only going to grow from here, but we lost someone who was incredible.
Yeah, and I've thought about that a lot, where he's the one-on-one or one of one. Absolutely amazing, the things that he was able to accomplish in such a short amount of time. Did I understand you right when you said that he really started getting into his faith during COVID?
So he was always a believer, and he would have characterized himself as a Christian. But when I say pressing into his faith, what I witnessed, and I saw him get to a seriousness about it during that time. And I think that for a lot of people, COVID was a time where the veil was pulled back on the enemy's game, where we had this semblance of liberty, but it was really a thin veneer. We had an illusion of liberty. We saw how fragile civilization was. And for so many people, it was faith affirming. And for Charlie, I think it was incredibly faith affirming as well. And I saw him at that point, his shift in the consumption of the materials and what he was reading. All of a sudden, then it was about the early church fathers instead of our founding fathers. And he started just pursuing that with incredible vigor at a level, his ability to concentrate and consume those materials and commit that stuff to memory was just incredible, otherworldly. He's a very talented brain.
Yeah, it's amazing. And going back to the one of one, right? I look at him like a bridge. The way that he was able to not only consume it, know it, and be able to recall, but the way that he could communicate it was on a level everybody could understand. Jordan Peterson's got an amazing mind, but he can't communicate worth a damn. Let's be honest.
Peterson, is brilliant and you can see it, but he cannot get to clarity easily. Right. And he stays at, in some cases, such an esoteric level. And I've spent some time with him. I got to have him at my table for a lunch at a Prager event. And I think of him highly. And actually, his business is a client of mine, the Peterson Academy. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. But even Charlie, in getting with Jordan Peterson, Charlie was also an incredible catalyst for getting other people's messages clarified and getting it out there in conversation. He was incredible in his interviews because he could do that. He could take the things that people like Jordan Peterson were saying and distill it and clarify it and communicate it to these young kids in a way that was even more palatable and reachable or accessible. Charlie was a unique talent in that way. And I think that's the long roundabout way of answering your question, is why did he have such an impact with the youth? If you were boldly proclaiming the truth in a time where it's dangerous, in a time where they're shutting you down for it, and you are unapologetically doing that, that has a tremendous pull for young men that are looking for answers. What's amazing now is the new rebel is a Christian conservative, and the new cool kid is a Christian conservative. And Charlie created that vibe shift on the campuses, and that is now the case. It blows my mind.
Yeah, so how do we not lose this momentum that he started? I'm going to guess you're younger than I am. I got more gray in my beard, right?
I think I'm giving you a run there, but no, I'll tell you, I'm 51 years old, and I think this is going to be my best decade. I think I know where you're going with that question. How do we keep this momentum going? I'll ask you this question. How many young kids out there, 14, 15, 16, had Charlie Kirk as their hero?
That's a good question.
I'll bet it is in the hundreds of thousands right now. I think Charlie planted seeds. They're going to be growing in these kids' hearts. Makes me emotional. I think what he has done will vastly outlive him. I think the effect that he's had on young men that are now trending more conservatively is going to be phenomenal. And how many of those kids have the talent to get out there bravely and speak the truth? We need an army of those folks, and I think Charlie has created that.
So that's shocking to me that there's that many. So you watch the clips, and it's always of course, for Instagram, you want to have the most debatable clip that you can put up, right? That's what gets followers. Got it. But I know that you could see the crowds gathering and searching for truth, and some people were just there to sow contention, right? But most of them were there because they were seeking truth.
Most of them were there as fans, too. I've been to those campus events live, and it changed over the years. Many of those campus events, if you were to go back at the beginning, Charlie was alone in a sea of enemies. Now it was 90% of them were fans of Charlie's wearing MAGA hats, and 10% of them that they ushered to the front of the line were the kids that hated Charlie and wanted to debate him, or differed on a point of view and wanted to challenge him, or wanted to use scripture, thought they were clever and could use scripture against Charlie. They were the minority. And that shift has only happened in the last couple of years. I mean, COVID shutting down their graduations and making them go home and consume school online and robbing them of their sports games, and all of that changed the tone. And you saw that all of a sudden these kids were waking up and willing to fight. I think as of this morning, it was reported we have 32,000 more applications for Turning Point chapters. What is happening? Attendance at church was up at historic global records on Sunday. Globally, it tells you something.
It does. And then you see these other countries, and that was shocking as hell to me, Bryce, just watching over in the UK and Australia and all these different countries that are having these celebration services for Charlie, right? I know the impact that he was making here. Maybe I don't, because I saw this stuff on Instagram and YouTube and what have you. But to see it, so many other countries, the impact that he was making is huge. But I guess where I really am going is, these people just saw their shepherd, for lack of better words, brutally assassinated. I'm not going to sugarcoat that at all. That was a brutal assassination.
Yeah, and it was brutal.
And you're talking, you got these college kids, they're probably going to be a little bit more courageous, but these 14, 15 years old, these kids, a lot of them are going to just shrink back in fear. And when I look at that, I look at the other side of it. I look at people our age, and we talk a lot about Gen X, right? And we drank from hoses and this, that, and the other. But there's a lot of damn broken Gen X men. There's a ton of them, right?
Hey, we were the latchkey kids, man. Come on.
Yeah. I don't know if I could pick my parents out of a lineup if they're in front of me, right? I'm kidding, of course. But anyways, then you have our kids who are basically divorcing us at rapid rates. Who shepherds these people going on? Because they're just getting their first taste of what truth is, right?
Yeah, I think that Charlie was Turning Point and Turning Point was Charlie, but at the same time, there was other very talented people there. Turning Point was a pretty big ecosystem. The fact now, Charlie's impact because of his death, as of today, the Charlie Kirk Show is #1 on podcasts. His content has been consumed by, I think he got 4 million more subscribers on his various accounts. People who had never heard of him are now listening to him. People who were considering themselves liberal are waking up. People are revisiting their faith and rekindling it because of Charlie. The impact, I think he's a true American martyr. And I think that his impact is going to be felt dramatically. And I think this is a true political turning point. I think Charlie started this thing, but I think that his death has amplified it, and it is going to be dramatic.
Agreed. So just tying this all back together, I'm talking directly to my audience here, Bryce. A man in today's world, right? We just witnessed this horrific assassination. We just got woke up. If you were going to give this man just a handful of tips on where to get started, where would that be?
Look, since we're on the subject of Charlie, if people are unfamiliar in the audience, they need to get familiar with him. They need to go and see what the left is saying about Charlie at his death. If you don't believe that there's an enemy, just read the people's reactions who are celebrating his death. They're all over the place. And you will realize that there is a spiritual battle going on, and we do have demons. And I think you cannot come away from reading those things and not recognize that. I think you all need to be responsible for yourselves. And I think that we need to get sharp. I think we need to be boldly proclaiming truth out there, God's truth. I think we need to be proclaiming the message that Charlie espoused loudly and boldly. And I think that includes our workplaces and everything. I think we need to be evangelists again. I think Christians and men need to be involved in politics. We abdicated those responsibilities, and over the decades we got to where we got because of that. Men bowed out of leadership. Men bowed out of running for school boards and participating in the public square. People falsely believed, and they were sold a pack of lies, that we shouldn't be involved in politics, and politics are just, in its simplest definition, how we organize ourselves, and Christians should be leading that charge. I think that we need to get physically fit and sharp. I think we need to develop real skills. And I respect you that you work in an office building and a cube or at a bank or whatever you're doing there. But I think we need to build some hard skills. and get involved in things in a meaningful way, because that is reality. Online is not reality. I think we need to touch grass, as the kids say, and be participants in life, not just ignorant observers. And too many of us were not willing to engage in the battle of ideas. And too many of us stopped that and let the patients in the asylum take over.
I would throw a word of caution out there as well, because there's a lot of men my age our rebellion, of course, was against Christianity. Right.
Yeah. You're talking to a preacher's kid.
So, we can't go out there and just engage, because the devil knows the Bible better than we do. And Bryce talked about demons out there. It is very evident. You go to any one of my social media accounts, you'll see it today. But we can't go out there and fight unarmed. We got to arm ourselves first.
That's right. Yeah, no, I love that. And I say that because that's true when it comes to argument and knowing why you believe what you believe. All that stuff is no different than if you're going to be carrying a gun, you better train and you better work out with it. You better learn the skills with whatever you're doing. And too many people forsake all that. And how do you know if somebody does not know their arguments and can't reason through something and don't know why they believe what they believe? They get emotional. They get upset. They want to scream in people's faces because they aren't equipped to handle the adversity of somebody saying, no, you're wrong. And the left owns that, but sometimes the right is no better. And we need to know why we believe what we believe, and we need to be armed with the truth.
Agreed. That emotional part, it couldn't be more true, Bryce. I've watched, people are angry right now, and I've watched them engage in debates online, and the first time that they don't have an answer, it resorts to name calling or something else. When you're armed with truth, you can use truth. Right.
Yeah, and that's, by the way, why Charlie, you rarely, if ever, saw him irritated, especially in the last couple of years. You saw him with a good-natured smile, and somebody be fighting mad and saying all kinds of ludicrous things or mocking him or saying just really stupid and disrespectful things, and you just saw him smile and engage them or say, okay, move on. You never saw him get upset because he knew the truth and he was armed with it, and the truth, it cuts through.
Agreed. And at the end of the day, we need to understand, too, that even if there's possession by demons, right? Even if there's demons in our world, those are still children of God at the other end of that. And we need to treat them as such.
That's right. And you know what? You may not, many times you are arguing with somebody who is demonically influenced, or you're pushing back, or you're engaging with somebody like that. You're not always doing it for them. There are people around them that will be won by your conduct and will be won by your arguments. And so keep that in mind. And that's a lot of the reasons why I get caught up in it sometimes too. And we'll say dumb stuff because I get irritated with people, or will mock them. Again, some of these people say just unbelievable stuff. It's better that we maintain our cool and maintain the truth, and in the face of the ridiculousness, and don't argue with bots. That's the other rule. But in the ridiculousness of it all, we need to maintain truth and maintain our righteous dignity, and not fall prey to the games that the playground kids play.
Agreed. Bryce, man, it has been absolutely awesome, man. I enjoy this conversation and just how loose it was, but a lot of great stuff that these men are going to walk away with. Where's some places where they can find you at and your content?
Yeah, the best place to start is my website, which has links to everything, and that's just bryceeddy.com. If you want to follow me on Instagram, where I do a fair amount of posting clips from the show, that's Super Bryce Eddy, and that's BRYCEEDDY. And then if you want to see me get some brain damage on X arguing with knuckleheads, then it's Bryce Eddy. And yeah, you can find my show wherever you consume podcasts, and on Rumble is where we concentrate on the video portion of this. And yeah, I'd love to have you subscribe and follow what we're doing.
I do got to mention, there are a couple videos with some head patches here and there. So
yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right, man. I appreciate you being on. God bless, and you have a wonderful day, my friend.
All right. Hey, thank you, Steve. I appreciate you.
You have just experienced the heat and pressure of the forge. Remember, words without action are meaningless. Now, after the heat of the forge, shape your thoughts, quench your brain, Then put your new tools to use, adding to your leadership. Tune in next week for more lessons from the Forge.